Do you like clean romance, billionaires, holidays, romcom? This month, I have Countdown to Love, Book 1 in my Billionaire Romance Holiday series set to free. I thought it would be fun if I read to you the opening chapter. I hope you enjoy. Danny flopped onto the couch and closed her eyes. Her stomach was so full of food she could hardly move. Good thing she was off for the week. She needed a nap. Settling into the soft, cushy pillows, she let out a loud sigh and stretched her legs out across the arm of the couch. Her cell phone rang, in the next room, on the kitchen counter. Groaning, she shook her head. This isn't happening. Maybe if she kept her eyes shut, the caller would hang up. The phone rang again. She smashed a pillow over her face. The ringing stopped. She waited a few seconds before she allowed her body to relax once more. Whoever was calling would have to wait. This was her vacation after all. She wiggled her body back into the cushions and snuggled her face into a pillow. Her phone rang. She snapped her eyes open. Drat. Why hadn't she thought to mute her phone before she decided to take a nap? Now she would have to get up from her comfy spot and do it. She was going to give the insistent caller a piece of her mind when she found out who it was. She tumbled off the sofa and mumbled as she ambled into the kitchen. She swiped the phone from the table. 2 voicemails. Maybe they were important. Yawning, she pressed the messages button. The first call was from her mother. She sounded drunk, as usual, muttering something about her rent. Danny huffed and deleted the message. The second message came from the landlord, Marty McFly, apparently named after the character from Back to the Future. He had this odd habit of calling his tenants like they were pals or something. He was raising the rent by $500. The official notice would be arriving by mail. Some pal he was. Huffing, she deleted the messages. So much for a nap. The last thing on her mind now was rest. Both messages dealt with money, rent. She laughed, reflecting on the irony of that, and set the phone on the dinette table. Shuffling through one of the kitchen drawers, she slid out her checkbook and flipped to a few pages in. Exactly as she figured, she transferred a big chunk of money to her mother earlier in the month, bigger than usual, and now Danny had just enough to fill up her own car and buy herself a bag of groceries. After Danny's dad died, her mother turned to alcohol to self-soothe, then to forget he was gone. She received her husband's pension, but it wasn't enough to cover everything, and she wasn't a functioning alcoholic, so she couldn't hold down a job. Her mother had only been a social drinker before then, having a drink maybe 3 times a year. Watching her become an alcoholic had stolen the happy memories she had of her mother, who was practically a stranger to her now. Danny tried to get her help, but she'd refused it every time. Danny didn't know how much longer she could help support her mother. She honestly hated paying her bills, but her mother had this hold over her. If she didn't do it, the consequences would be worse. Because when Danny tried to stop paying her bills before, her mother started coming around asking for more money. Danny definitely couldn't handle that emotionally. At least Danny had Callie and her dad. They were much more like family than her mother ever could be. She shoved the checkbook back into the drawer and bumped it shut with her back. What was she going to do? How could she afford more rent? She'd recently started building a nest egg. She didn't want to start taking from that. She blew a hair out of her face, glanced at her awesome new shoes, waiting expectantly near the front door. She could start by taking those back. But after that? What then? She placed a hand on her head, feeling a headache coming on. Searching the cabinet, she found a bottle of Tylenol and shook it. Empty. Ugh, she tossed the bottle into the trash can. Her mind went to the pile of projects waiting for her return to work. She loved her job, was thankful every day for it, but the workload had gotten to be a bit overwhelming in the past month. Since she had only been employed with Innovations Corps for the past 7 months, she didn't know how to approach the matter without looking incompetent. In previous jobs as a software engineer, when the company became lucrative and her boss piled assignments on her, Danny had spoken up about the possibility of bringing in assistants. Her suggestions had backfired on her every time. Some of her bosses let her go, claiming they were making budget cuts. Others had added to her workload until she became so miserable she had to quit. But the worst had been when her coworker made her look incompetent to the boss. They had both sat her down and instructed her in the basics of software programming before demoting her and bringing her in coworker's best friend to replace her. Danny learned the real reason why they demoted her when she overheard the intentionally loud conversation between her coworker and friend, how excited they were to bring her on board, even though she had no experience. Danny quit instead, totally humiliated. Alec had offered her a job right when the whole humiliation process was ending. She hadn't hesitated to say yes to the offer. She'd known Alec outside of work since the spring, nearly 8 months. Callie introduced Danny to Alec shortly after she started dating him. Yes, Alec treated her well, but they mostly interfaced outside of work. As the CEO of the company, Alec wore a different hat, a serious business hat. He oversaw a lot of decisions. He was a busy man. She was sure that the last thing he wanted to hear was that she needed help. Danny rubbed her temples. She needed this job. Without it, she wouldn't be able to take care of her bills, much less her mother. She would have to suck it up and deal with it. The headache burrowed itself deeper into her forehead. She winced in pain. Her phone dinged. A text. Sighing, she reached for the cell. It was from Callie. Guess what? There's big news on Monday. Make sure you're on time for the meeting. Alec won't even tell me what it's about. Danny sent a question mark and an emoji with its mouth in the shape of an O. She sunk into the chair at the table, wondering what the news might be. Maybe Innovations acquired another client, someone important like Leanne, owner of Snapshot Electronics. Working with his ex-fiancée Leanne, who left him at the altar, had been challenging at first for Alec. She was weirdly relentless in her pursuit of him. Alec and Callie started a fake relationship to get Leanne to leave Alec alone, but it had quickly turned into the real thing. The real thing. She pondered that for a moment. Danny had just turned 30. Would she ever find someone to spend her life with? Donnie's face flashed in her mind. Next to Callie, he was her closest friend. She had met him around the same time she met Alec. There had been a small spark between them, but nothing that turned into something romantic. She pictured his dark cheekbones rising when he smiled, the way his dark eyes crinkled when he laughed. He was a good-looking man, financially successful, kind, a real catch. She shook her head. Why on earth was she thinking about Donnie like this? They were good friends, yes, but just friends. It was probably best to stay single anyway. Things tended to get too complicated in relationships. She nodded as if to confirm that to herself. Being single had tons of benefits. She could do as she pleased without having to check in with anyone. Stay up all night, watch sappy romance movies if she felt like it, not have to worry about her heart getting broken. Was that the real reason why she hadn't dated in a while? Mark had been her boyfriend for 2 years. She thought they had something special. Turns out he didn't feel the same way. He ended up leaving her for another woman. Danny didn't give up on men right away. In fact, she started dating another man a few months later, but the relationship didn't go anywhere. After that, she pretty much lost interest in the whole dating thing. Maybe she was meant to be single. She can make all her decisions, travel on a whim, and not worry about anyone eating her leftovers. She was okay with that, wasn't she?